Before we start the episode, I would like to read a dedication written by Lola Montez in her book, The Arts of Beauty. And I would like to dedicate this episode to all of my listeners using Lola's words. To all men and women of every land who are not afraid of themselves, who trust so much in their own souls that they dare to stand up in the might of their own individuality to meet the tidal currents of the world. You may remember Sam Brannan from the very first episode as the man who brought news of the discovery of gold to San Francisco, chanting, "Gold, gold, gold from the American River." When Brannan first arrived in 1846 on the ship Brooklyn, he was the leader of a Mormon colony who intended to start a self-sufficient colony with 238 saints. His entourage of carpenters, blacksmiths, farmers, bakers, and everything a community might need doubled or even tripled the population of San Francisco. He had brought a printing press and used it to publish San Francisco's first newspaper, the Alta. Sam Brannan and his people quickly jump-started the local economy in California, settling Mormon Island on the Sacramento Delta. Queens of the Mines features the authentic stories of gold rush women who blossomed from the camouflaged, twisted roots of California. These are true stories with some of my own fabrication of descriptive details. It is recommended that you start this series from the first episode. In this episode, we continue and complete the story of Donna Lola Montez, the burlesque sensation with a secret past, who will reveal herself as California's 19th century Queen of Temptation. This is a true story from America's largest migration, the Gold Rush. I am Andrea Anderson, and this is Queens of the Mines. Support Queens of the Mines and discover healthier-looking skin with You-Ology, a completely customizable skincare solution that you create by taking a simple quiz. With over 40,000 possible combinations, this is skincare for no one else. Cleansers, serums, moisturizers, creams, masks, makeup remover, toning spritz, and SPF. 10% of the profits of your unique order is donated to supporting survivors of childhood sexual abuse, and 20% to the production of Queens of the Mines, so you can feel really great about treating yourself this time. Shop now from home at uniqueproducts.com/Queens of the Mines. That's YOUNIQUE products.com/Queens of the Mines. The preceding program features stories that contain adult content, including violence, which may be disturbing to some listeners or secondhand listeners. So, discretion is advised. Chapter 7, Part 2. Lola's mother had found out about her new life in Europe, and she went into mourning as if her daughter had died, sending out customary funeral letters on stationery edged in black. Lola could have easily been the richest woman to ever live, had she preferred her own advantage over political freedoms. Lola's identity had been revealed at Her Majesty's Theater, and it led to an arrest on the charge of bigamy. Lola's wealthy new husband, George Trafford Heald, bailed her out of jail, and the two ran to Spain. The feisty and sometimes violent Montez and Heald were not getting along, and the couple eventually decided to split while in Portugal. When George Heald suddenly and mysteriously drowned in Portugal, Lola gained Heald's large inheritance. And with her new fortune, she was ready to find a new start. It was 1850, and she left for the land the whole world had been rushing to, the United States of America. On the stages up and down the east coast of the New World, Lola Montez debuted a Southern Italian folk dance, her own gussied-up version of a lively tarantella. She wore tights in the color of her flesh, and layers of petticoats in every color that bounced with her quick, flirtatious steps. In her act, she was playing the part of a maiden in the country who had spiders in her clothes. The spiders hung from her gloves and gown and hid under the layers of her petticoats. As she shook off and stomped away the spiders that riddled her costume and the stage, she exposed her shapely legs, and as she lifted her skirt, the men cheered for her to find each and every spider. Lola lifted her petticoat so high that the men in the audience went crazy, for they could see, on stage, Lola Montez wore no underclothing at all, and she was a smash. Although not everyone was impressed, and some believed her performance to be even unprofessional and talentless. Lola stirred up excitement on that side of the New World for 2 years. After one particular show at an East Coast theater, the manager openly criticized her spider act. Backstage, the sassy star retaliated with the bullwhip she carried on stage, busting the manager's face wide open. Denying the assault later, Lola said instead, "There is one comfort in the falsehood, which is that this man very likely would have deserved the whipping." It was soon decided that she may be a better match with the lawless West. And without telling anyone, Lola caught a ride via a Pacific Mail paddle wheel steamer in New Orleans, headed for California. After the passage along the Isthmus of Panama, and finally on the last ship of the voyage, Lola stood on the deck with a distinguished male fellow passenger. They were looking out over the water. He was asking about her life. "My father was Irish," she told him. "Irish? Well, then where did you get the name Montez?" Lola stared out into the ocean. "I took it," she said. "Just like I've taken everything I ever wanted." He chuckled approvingly. He was Sam Brannan, California's first millionaire. Brannan was on his way home after doing business in Boston and New York. He had a wife and 4 children at home in California, yet he was paying much attention to his glamorous shipmate. The 29-year-old Lola was by now an epic tabloid sensation in the United States. Her political schemes, erotic exploits, and violent temper had made the top headlines throughout the world. Yet no one would be at the Long Wharf to greet her when she stepped off the ship into San Francisco in 1853. Lola Montez was arriving unannounced. On the northeast corner of Sansom and Halleck Streets stood the American Theater. The American Theater was the first brick large building built on the newly made soil along Sansom Street, on land reclaimed from the Yerba Buena Cove. During its opening night, 2 years earlier in 1851, the American Theater was so crowded that the walls sunk a couple of inches from the weight. The Irish satirist Richard Brinsley Sheridan's comedy School for Scandal was playing, and Lola Montez was playing Lady Tizelle. The theater was able to charge $5 for the best seats, an outrageous price. The reason being, the men in the audience desired to see Lola Montez's famous risque spider dance, the one they had read about in the East Coast papers. And with that, it was more than a dance that they wanted to see, if you know what I mean. Lola obliged on the second night to the delight of the mostly male audience, her body exposed by her contortions. She won the people over through naked charisma and pure force of personality. The act was reasonably well received by some, and it outraged others who felt they were obliged to look for spiders in improper places. Lola Montez was an eccentric woman who fascinated the masses entirely. She wore trousers and carried a bullwhip. She had an uncommon for ladies fondness for hand-rolled cigarettes, and she smoked openly. She became the first woman to ever be photographed while smoking. She straddled the highbrow and lowbrow classes, rejecting the restrictive social codes associated with the Victorian notions of true womanhood. She had the appearance of a duchess. As she spoke, the royal illusion evaporated. Her vile mouth would have been considered unacceptable even in the wee hours of the city's most provocative smoking clubs. Although they watched her every move and copied her style, San Francisco's respectable classes never truly embraced Lola Montez, and she felt it. Maybe it was because Lola was now being courted by the married Sam Brannan. He was spoiling her in finer style than her Bavarian King Ludwig had ever provided her. Quite an impressive feat. Sam Brannan had an income of $1,000 a day, over $30,000 now in 2020. He owned 170,000 acres, over 250 square miles, where present-day Los Angeles County lies. He lived well and lavishly, drinking and womanizing freely. Anne Eliza Brannan, his wife, eventually divorced Sam. And when she did, she took half of everything he had, and Lola moved on. This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Columbia Mercantile 1855. Columbia Mercantile 1855 is creating Eureka moments for every single shopper. At first glance, It would appear a living museum until you look closer. In the clever Gold Rush era aesthetic, you will find a treasure trove of gold standard products for your modern life. Now more than ever, locals are discovering the amazing, reimagined, real working Gold Rush era general store. And Teresa, the owner, has not changed or increased prices since the COVID crisis. To better serve the community, Columbia Mercantile 1855 has tripled the amount of food and beverages ordered since the shelter-in-place began. Teresa carries a mix of quality international products and locals to replicate diverse provisions of the 19th century when Columbia was California's second largest city after San Francisco. From the mundane, paper towels, toilet paper, poison oak soap, to customer-requested French and Irish butters, firm tofu, and even duck. It is common to hear, "Wow, I didn't expect to find that here in Columbia." You can support local producers while shopping at the Mercantile 1855, such as Diesel Family Ranch, Inner Sanctum Cellars, Indigene, Cover's Apple Ranch, Gold Country Honey Farms, Jamestown Olive Oils, Liz Sandoval's Leche's Sauces, and Pamela Anderson's Simply Amazing Kettle Corn. The Columbia Mercantile 1855 is located in Columbia State Historic Park at 11245 Jackson Street, near the St. Charles Saloon. And it is a great place to keep our local economy moving, and she even accepts EBT. At a time like this, it is so important to shop local, and the Columbia Mercantile 1855 is friendly, welcoming, and fairly priced. Open daily from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. In San Francisco's early years, attending the theater was a mostly male-centered activity, for they were the majority of the population. By 1853, it had become a highbrow, sophisticated activity for audiences of both genders, giving a place that countered the degrading, debilitating atmosphere of the time. The American theater had a rival that was aptly named the San Francisco. One of the first original plays staged in the city was put on at the Theater San Francisco. Who's Got the Countess? A satire profiting off of Lola's deflating balloon. For 2 weeks, the burlesque packed the house. Some audience members accused the play of going too far. A writer for the Herald said the show was an exceeding coarse and vulgar attack upon one who, whatever her faults and foibles may have been, has proved herself a noble-hearted and generous woman. Lola Montez was performing on stage one evening in Sacramento when someone laughed during her spider dance. Lola berated the audience and stormed off stage. In the papers, it read that it was believed Montez had papered the house with her supporters. A letter challenging the editor to a duel soon surfaced, assertedly from Lola. It read, "You may choose between my dueling pistols or take your choice of a pill out of a pill box. One shall be poison and one shall not." When Lola first sailed to San Francisco, on the same trip she met Brannon, she also met Patrick Purdy Hull. He was an Irish reporter and the owner of the newspaper, the San Francisco Whig. Lola said Patrick Hull could tell a story better than any other man she'd known, and that was why she fell in love with him. On July 1st, 1853, at the Mission Dolores, in a Catholic ceremony, Lola Montez and Patrick Hull were married, making Lola a U.S. citizen. Lola did not want to live among the ridicule in the city, and instead bought a mine in a swelteringly hot ravine. The property was close to two of the richest mines in Nevada, California, the Empire Mine and the North Star Mine. And she left San Francisco for the unincorporated town of Grass Valley. 3 years prior to her move to Grass Valley, the town held its first election under a large oak tree, and 1 year later a building was constructed on the site. It was first used as the office for the Gold Hill Mining Company, and then as a schoolhouse. Lola Montez purchased the building at 248 Mill Street in Grass Valley and made it the home where her parrot, pet monkey, herself, and Hull would live. The town's disdain for the woman was proven by Grass Valley's reverend when he spoke in a sermon denouncing Montez, warning the locals of the newest evil in town, calling the woman a hussy. Word passed to Lola, who was outraged at the statement and decided she would prove the quality of her act to the man herself. That night, she stormed into the reverend's house, where he sat eating dinner with his wife. Lola Montez demanded the couple watch her full performance, and she stomped and clapped and shook around the living room until he finally agreed she was, in fact, a professional. Montez ended up hating her life with her newest husband, and rather spent her days in Grass Valley with the young girl next door. Patrick Hull was tired of the parties and extremely spiteful of his wife's popularity. A baron who was visiting from Europe attended one of Lola's social gatherings, gifting her a grizzly bear to add to her exotic collection of pets. She named the bear Major. Patrick Hull was insanely jealous, and this final straw yanked a tear in the relationship that could not be mended. Hull sued Montez for divorce, naming a German doctor as the correspondent. A few days later, the doctor was found in nearby hills, shot dead. The neighbors who ran a boarding house had a daughter who was fascinated with the clearly unique Lola Montez and her private menagerie. It was not long before Lola was equally fascinated by the little girl, who was genuinely talented. She taught her to sing and dance and live wildly, and allowed her to play in her collection of extravagant costumes. Lola taught the young Irish girl to sing ballads and perform ballet steps, fandangos, jig reels, and Irish Highland flings from Lola's own childhood. The little blonde child's sense of rhythm surpassed Lola's, and she impressed the theatrical elite, strolling players, and entertainers who came to the lavish parties Montez hosted. The unlikely pair rode bareback together on a horse and pony. Despite the townspeople's opinion, the mother of the girl liked Lola and appreciated the time she spent with her daughter. Are you enjoying the podcast? Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. It is so important. If you would like to donate to the continuation of the podcast, check out the donate button on queensoftheminds.com. In the 2 years that Lola lived in Grass Valley, the California gold rush was ending. Yet there was another gold mining rush in full swing. She hired Augustus Folland, a married American actor, as her new manager. They hired a company of actors, and within 2 weeks, they were all sailing to Sydney, Australia. By the time they arrived 2 months later, She had taken her new manager on as a lover. The following week, Lola's show opened at the Royal Victoria Theatre, and the show titled Lola Montez in Bavaria. That night, she fired most of the company, and they quickly sued her for damages. As Lola and Folland were waiting to depart Sydney for Melbourne on board the Waratah, a sheriff's officer boarded the ship with a warrant of arrest, demanding she paid the sacked actors. Lola ran to her cabin, where she undressed. She sent out a note inviting the officer to come in and arrest her and drag her out nude, and he left empty-handed. Audiences began to diminish at the Theatre Royal in Melbourne as Montez performed in her Bavarian role. She made the decision to bring out her spider dance. It was an instant hit for the men in the audience. Again, Montez raising her skirts so high the audience could see she wore no underclothing at all. The papers roared that her performance was utterly subversive to all ideas of public morality. The theater began to show heavy losses when respectable families ceased to attend the theater. One even summoned the mayor of Melbourne to issue a warrant for her arrest for public indecency, but he refused. Months later, in Ballarat, packed houses of miners were showering gold nuggets at her feet, and yet again the papers attacked her notoriety. Lola by now had a motto: courage, and shuffle the cards. When Lola ran into the Ballarat Times editor, Henry Seacamp, at the United States Hotel, she retaliated by publicly bullwhipping him, resulting in the rest of her tour being canceled. Folland and Montez quarreled excessively as they left for San Francisco on May 22, 1856. And on the journey near Fiji on the night of July 8th, Folland mysteriously fell overboard and drowned. Some believed he committed suicide after their fight. Others believe he was pushed. No official investigation followed. When Lola arrived back in the United States in 1856, she was different, subdued. Whatever happened on that ship changed Lola Montez. Her previous lover from the past, Alexandre Dumas, once said, "She is fatal to any man who dares to love her." Uncharacteristically, she sold her jewelry and gave the proceeds to Folland's children. She began using the remains of her bank account to give homeless and less fortunate women food, water, and money. She decided to spread knowledge rather than perform, and began lecturing on her life, fashion, beauty, and famous women. "I have known all the world has to give. All." She began to write her book titled The Arts of Beauty, or Secrets of a Lady's Toilet, with hints to gentlemen on the art of fascinating. Dance with all the might of your body and all the fire of your soul, in order that you may shake all melancholy out of your liver. And you need not restrain yourself with the apprehension that any lady will have the least fear that the violence of your movements will ever shake anything out of your brains. I never claimed to be famous. Notorious, I have always been. She moved to New York and reinvented herself once more, this time embracing Christianity. And with the Reverend Charles Chauncey Burr, she arranged to deliver a series of moral lectures in Britain and America written by him. She returned to Ireland and did her final lecture in Dublin, America and its People, speaking in Limerick and Cork, then returned to America in 1859. Later that year, the Philadelphia Press wrote, Lola was living very quietly uptown and doesn't have much to do with the world's people. Some of her old friends, the Bohemians, now and then drop in to have a little chat, and though she talks beautifully of her present feelings and way of life, she generally, by way of parentheses, takes out her little tobacco pouch and makes a cigarette or two for self and friend, and then falls back upon old times with decided gusto and effect. But she doesn't tell anybody what she's going to do. Within 2 years, Lola Montez began showing the effects of syphilis, the last contribution to the marriage from Patrick Hurdy Hull, and her body began to waste away. Lola, 39 years old, suffered a massive stroke and died alone in poverty on January 7, 1861. She is buried in the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. The marker simply reads, Mrs. Eliza Gilbert, died January 7, 1861. You can read Lola's own writing, The Arts of Beauty, Secrets of a Lady's Toilet, with hints to gentlemen on the art of fascinating, Lectures of Lola Montez, Anecdotes of Love, and Timeless Beauty, Advice to Ladies and Gentlemen. Lola's restored house at 248 Mill Street in Grass Valley is now a registered California historical landmark. Mount Lola, Nevada County and the Sierra Nevadas, north of Interstate 80's highest point at 9,148 feet, is named in her honor, as well as 2 lakes you can find in the Tahoe National Forest, named Upper and Lower Lola Montez Lakes. Now, let's talk about song lyrics. You may have heard this famous lyric, Whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. Written by Richard Adler and Jerry Ross for the 1955 musical play The Damn Yankees, Whatever Lola Wants was inspired by Lola Montez. Or what about, her name was Lola. She was a showgirl with yellow flowers in her hair and a dress cut down to there. Yes, even Copacabana was inspired by our girl, Lola Montez. In light of the Black Lives Matter movement and the incredible change we are seeing right now, I would like to mention a quote said by Marian Anderson. No matter how big a nation is, it is no stronger than its weakest people. And as long as you keep a person down, some part of you has to be down there to hold him down. So it means you cannot soar as you might otherwise. Until recently, historians and the public have dismissed conflict history, and important elements that are absolutely necessary for understanding American history have sometimes been downplayed or virtually forgotten. Lola constructed an identity as a Spanish dancer when Anglo-Americans in California swayed between appreciating aspects of non-white culture and rejecting them. If we do not incorporate racial and ethnic conflict in the presentation of the American experience, we will never understand how far we have come and how far we have to go. No matter how painful, we can only move forward by accepting the truth. I am Andrea Anderson. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. Let's meet again next time when we meet Lola's neighbor, the little Irish girl in Grass Valley, next time on Queens of the Mines. Queens of the Mines was written, produced, and narrated by me, Andrea Anderson. The theme song in San Francisco Bay is by DBUK. You can find the links to their music, tour dates, and merchandise, as well as the links to all of our social media and research at queensofthemines.com.